So the biggest and probably most important question in this entire article that everyone's going to be wondering is, how do you find a house to flip? It's extremely challenging to find a property that you can buy at a good enough price that you have that cushion that you're not going to lose money, and if you do a good job, you can make a profit. So some of the number one way, I would say, of all the ways, is direct mail. So I think if you talk to any house flipper, they pretty much all rely heavily on direct mail. And what do I mean by direct mail? So I mean finding basically is just sending out postcards or sending out letters in the mail to different properties that have some type of indication that might lead you to think that that could be a good property to flip. And you'll have to send quite a lot of these. A lot of times a beginner will think if they can just send out 5 or 10 letters, someone will call and they'll get a great deal and it'll be their first flip. Well, it's not that quite that easy unless you have an extremely high quality list of leads to mail. Um, that's my personal business structure. Is I don't send out tens of thousands of letters. In fact, I barely even send out hundreds of letters. I maybe send 100 to 200 letters a month, but those letters are highly focused to the most motivated sellers. And so it's a very targeted and focused approach, so that I'm not doing as much volume as I could do, but the time that I'm spending is much better invested. So, which properties do you send these letters to? Well, you want to look for some kind of indication of motivation. You don't want to, I think the best textbook example would be, look at the house down the street that just sold on the MLS. The realtor listed it, and it's fully renovated, beautiful turnkey, and the owner is just got a promotion at their job, and they have plenty of money in the bank. They're buying new cars, and they're obviously not in a distressed or motivated situation. That is exactly the property that you do not want to market to and spend your time and money working to get in touch with. You want to find the polar opposite of that property, which would be maybe still down the street, but a property where a number of indicators, which number one could be just the visible appearance of the property. So overgrown grass, peeling paint, junk in the yard, visible repairs needed if the roof is missing shingles or tiles. Any one of those indicators is a really good sign. If it looks like it's vacant, if there's mail or newspapers piling up, all these different indicators tell you that there might be something going on there. It's possible that the owner is just tired of taking care of the property. Maybe they had tenants that they had to evict, and they just haven't had the wherewithal to go through the process of finding new tenants, or whatever the case may be. That's probably, I would say, the number one indicator to look for and approach to finding a deal. Would be finding that property, sending them a letter. The best ways to do this are driving for dollars and using a direct mail service. So I'm a big fan of driving for dollars, which is a phrase that we in the real estate world use that refers to just going out in your car, driving around different neighborhoods, and looking for properties that have some of these indicators of distress, as we call it. So you could be driving around your neighborhood. You could drive around at new neighborhoods. Obviously, you don't want to drive the same streets every time because you want to look for new properties that you hadn't seen before. And this is just one of the best ways to find deals, and it's tried and true. It always has been. I mean, not maybe not always, for a very long time. This has been one of the best ways to find the best deals. Almost every investor I know either does this or has people that do it for them. And so once you find those leads, again, if you have the time and you want to save money, you can sit there and write them all letters. But that's tough. I've done it myself. I've personally sat down and wrote letters to dozens of sellers. I've also written one letter and left the name blank and the address blank, and then photocopied it 20 times or 50 times. And then for all the deals, properties that I was interested in or thought were distressed, I would just write in the name and the address, and it would be a much quicker way for me to mail all those owners. However, I don't recommend that. Direct mail is very cheap, and there's so many providers out there that can provide really, really high quality products for you at very reasonable pricing. And there's so many different options too. You don't need to start off with a $3 per piece mailer. If you're just getting started, there's a lot of investors have proven that the old postcard still works very well, and I'm sure you've received them yourself. I get them all the time from realtors in the neighborhood saying, "We just sold the house down the street. We want to sell your house." We're doing the exact same thing. We're sending that postcard out, and it's saying, "I want to buy your house." And essentially, the message is, "I'm a cash buyer. I saw your property. I'm interested in buying it. I'd like to make you an all cash offer. I will take it as is. I'll close quick. I'll take care of the tenants. Whatever your problem is, I will handle it. If you'd like to sell, please give me a call so I can make you an offer." So that's generally the message. Of course, depending on your market and what type of properties you're going after, you might want to tweak it, but that's pretty much always the message. So getting that message out, again, like I said, you want to find a direct mail company. There's plenty of them out there, plenty of competition. The pricing is reasonable. And again, the postcards can start as little as maybe 50 cents a piece, sometimes less. And then the higher end pieces will do. So I personally do a mix of postcards. A lot of times I'll do a campaign where if I spot a property, first they get a postcard, then a couple weeks later, they get a letter. Then a couple weeks later, they get another postcard, and then again another letter, and that tends to catch their attention. On the direct mail topic, you never want to just send one letter. Now, yeah, you'll get lucky every once in a while and maybe send one letter and get a call back and get a deal out of it, but that's extremely rare. You need to be consistent with these sellers, especially because you got to remember they aren't necessarily looking to sell the day that you happen to stumble across their house, right? Whatever situation is going on is evolving, and at some point, they get to a point where they start thinking, you know what? I'm done with this house. Maybe I want to just get rid of it and not deal with it. And that's when you need your phone number and your letter to be in their face. So that's the reason why you need to consistently send them letters. And a lot of the direct mail companies will recommend that 6 months would be the minimum to send one letter every month for 6 months. But really the most proven successful time frame would be to send a letter every month for about 9 months, 9 to 10 months. And if you do that with all your leads, a lot more of them are going to end up calling you and selling to you, and you'll get a lot more houses to flip. So on that topic, now there is one service that you absolutely cannot get by without in this world. In terms of the driving for dollars and direct mail, there is one service that is absolutely critical to this part of the business. It's an app that I use every single day. It's called Deal Machine, and I'm a huge fan of them. I'm not even sure if I'm allowed to be really mentioning other businesses, but it's such a critical part of my business, and almost every investor I know just completely depends on this service. And basically it's an app with a phone, a map. And so when you're driving for dollars, you can just, when you see a house, okay, that house looks kind of run down, You click on it in the map, and if you need, you can see all the owner's information, but you just add the property. And then the other aspect, the direct mail side, is already worked into there too. So you just press start mail, and then I automatically get whatever uh, schedule of mailing you determine. So, like I said, I alternate between postcard and letter every month, and that is the number one way for that I use in our business for finding deals. I believe there are other services that do the same thing. I have tried a couple of them in the past, but just I think it's one of those things that across the board there's no competition. Um, so my experience has been that the Deal Machine app is the best one for that, and it's the single critical service that I need for my business. Um, that there's not another competitor that does it similarly. Now, in terms of direct mail companies, there's plenty of those. I do have my favorites there also. I like working with Open Letter, but really doesn't matter. They're all great. Well, I don't know if they're all great, but all the ones that I've worked with have been great. And there's not much of a differentiator there. It's personal preference, and maybe pricing might matter to you, but the difference with those companies between the Driving for Dollars app, Deal Machine, and the actual direct mail companies is going to be that you may also want to be marketing to companies or to leads and houses that you didn't see driving for dollars. So, what properties are you going to market to that you didn't just stumble across? Where are you going to find out about these properties? Well, there's a few different ways you can do that. One is going to be going online and just finding a list of motivated sellers. And there are different websites out there that you can use. I think List Source is a big one, and a few others out there. That's, again, this is not something that really doesn't matter who you go to. So you probably just want to see who's got the best pricing. But you want to find a list of the indicators of what's typically makes somebody more likely to be wanting to sell fast, wanting to sell for cash, wanting to sell as is. All of the different reasons why somebody would want to sell to a flipper and not just call a real estate agent, a realtor, to list it publicly on the MLS. So, what are those indicators? Those are anything from a common one is age. So, looking at older owners that particularly absentee owners. We call absentee owners anybody that doesn't live in the property. So if they might live in the house next door, but they don't live in that house, because if it's their house, if they don't live in that house, then they don't absolutely need that house, right? Everybody needs shelter. And so if you are an owner occupant, meaning you live in the home, you do need a house. You can't just sell the house the next day and it doesn't matter, right? A lot of times owner occupants do call us and we do buy their houses to flip, but it's not as often, and they still need to find another place to go live. So, and when you have an absentee owner, basically we're talking about properties that most of the time are a rental property. Sometimes it was, they lived there and they moved out and they just hadn't sold it, or, it could be a number of different situations. It could have been their family was living there then and they passed away. There's a number of different reasons why you may have an absentee owner. I'd say just the majority of them, though, are going to be a rental property. So that's probably the number one indicator. You want to look for properties that the owner does not live in. I personally, one of my biggest factors or indicators is that I always make sure the properties I'm looking at have not sold in the last about 3 years, I'd say. For the most part, if somebody just bought a house in the last year or two, it's very, very rare that there's a reason they would be a motivated or distressed seller, unless something really drastic changed in their life. I did just get a new flip under contract yesterday, and this is probably the newest one I've ever dealt with. This guy bought the house 5 years ago. So I'm pretty surprised. I've most of the time when somebody calls me to flip their house, they have owned it for some time. But in this case, he's going through a divorce and he wants to move to a different island, and the house is just, it was dated and kind of, not in the best condition when he got it, and he just has been traveling a lot and hasn't been there, and it's gotten worse. So, and he also wants to sell within 30 days. And that's why he called me, and it worked out perfect. So that's also actually a case where he's an owner occupant. So that does show you that it can happen. It's just much less common. So back to building your list. Again, the biggest indicators I personally look for are age. So somebody that's older that, maybe is getting tired of being a landlord, definitely an absentee owner. You can also, a lot of these online list services provide information such as their mortgage. You can find out, are they delinquent on their mortgage? How much equity do they have in their mortgage? And again, the sales date, right? So you want to make sure they didn't buy it recently, and you want to make sure that they have equity. So I will typically do, as a very just general, if I'm looking to build a list, I'm going to look for owners 60 years old and over, that are absentee owners that have owned the property for more than 3 years, and that have more than, I would say, at least 20 to 30% equity in the property. Because if the property is worth $1 million and they owe the bank $990,000, there's no way for me to make a deal out of it. There has to be some equity in there for us to be able to negotiate and come up with a win-win. So once you create that list, you can take that to one of those online direct mail companies that we talked about before. Again, not much of a difference between all of them. The style of the letter, the price, things like that would help you decide which one you personally would like to work with. Next up, so we've covered direct mail, we've covered driving for dollars, we've covered building lists online. So the other ways to find deals are from wholesalers. Now, where I live here in Maui, there are not really any wholesalers. Our business is the only active and consistent wholesaler that I'm aware of. And I really, really wish that there were other people doing wholesales here in Maui, because as a flipper as well, it would make my job a lot easier, because finding the deal is the hardest part, again, especially in this market. Now, I've heard about back during the recession, how easy it was, every house listed on the market was just dying to sell, and you can offer them whatever you wanted and they'd take it, but it's just not like that today. So finding the deals is the hardest part, and having a wholesaler to find the deal for you is just a dream come true. A wholesaler basically means another investor. A lot of times, like in my case, I am a flipper and a wholesaler, and I also buy rental properties. So I kind of dabble in a little bit of all these aspects of the business. But there's plenty of guys out there that only do wholesales, and there's plenty of girls out there that only flip houses, and they have their focus, and that's what they do. So what is a wholesaler? A wholesaler is somebody that goes out and does this work of finding the deal. So all those things we've been talking about so far, doing the direct mail, the driving for dollars, finding those sellers and talking to them and negotiating the deal, getting it under contract, which means they have the legal right to buy that property and the seller cannot sell it to anybody else. They have a purchase and sale agreement or a purchase contract signed with that seller. And so they have the exclusive right to buy that property. Then they go out to all the flippers and other investors and say, hey, I have this great deal and I'm willing to sell it to you. And then they are selling the contract for that house. So a great example, I just closed a wholesale for a house where I got the house under contract for $800,000. It was probably worth, in the condition it was in, it needed a lot of work, about 400,000 in repairs. But in its condition, it was worth about 1.1, I would say $1 million to 1.1 million. So I was able to wholesale that contract, sell that contract. I sold it for $30,000. So to another investor who paid $830,000 total for that property. So this was possible because I did all the work of finding that seller. I had sent him direct mail, and I called him, I sent him letters over time. And after a few months, he called me and he had been ready to sell. And we talked for months. It was a long process. It wasn't just a couple days and boom, we're done. It was a long process. And at the time when I got the deal under contract, I had other deals going on and I didn't have the bandwidth to take on this house to flip it. So instead, I just decided, let's just make a quick profit on it, pass it on to another investor, which is why we ended up deciding to wholesale it. So again, that's essentially what I did in that role. Was I acted as a wholesaler. I found the deal and I brought it to another investor that was able to buy it at a discount, and even after paying me the fee for doing the work of finding the deal. And he bought it at the discount because it works for everybody, it works for the seller too, because now the seller didn't have to worry about the repairs. The buyer is going to handle all of those repairs. I was actually just there yesterday, and they've got quite a lot of work going on. It's going to be about 6 months worth of work because, like I said, it's a really big renovation and it's a really big, really nice property. But once he's done, it's going to be worth about 1.7 to 1.9 million. And it's going to be a great deal for everybody all around. So again, going back to the wholesalers, there are, like I said, a lot of people out there and a lot of companies out there that do this full time. That's all they do is wholesale deals. And I love wholesalers. I wish we had them. Most markets do. Again, my market is very small. We have a population of 150,000 people here, and we're an island, so there's not just another town next door where other people are wholesaling and they're doing deals in Maui. So chances are that there is somebody that is doing wholesaling in your market. If I were you, that would be the first step on my list. I would go find those wholesalers and tell them you want to be on their buyers list. You're a flipper. You want to be added to their buyers list, which would mean that basically you'll give them your email address and your phone number, and you'll probably give them an idea of what you're looking for. If you're starting off, you'll probably be looking for lower priced properties, easier, less barriers to entry, and smaller rehabs, so you can kind of ease into the process. So how do you find the wholesalers, right? Well, you go to real estate meetups. That's another way to find deals. Um, Essentially, really another way, like that's the best way to find wholesalers is by going to real estate meetups. You can also find them by going on websites like realestatebees.com, where real estate professionals are listing their businesses and their services. Just like you can find Maui home buyers on there, you can find any other real estate wholesaler in your market that can help you find deals. And then you reach out to that person, you let them know, I want to be added to your buyers list. Once you're added to their buyers list, anytime they get a deal under contract that they want to sell, again, they're going to be selling the contract, and that's going to give you the right to buy that house. They're going to email you that deal. They're typically going to send you the address, pictures of the house, what the price is, what the assignment fee is, and what they estimate the rehab to be. And then they should also have comparable sales and not sure if I said pictures, but pictures of the property. So again, you can find those wholesalers on realestatebees.com, but you can also find them by meeting them in person and going to your local real estate meetups. So almost every city, probably almost every town out there has a group of real estate investors that have meetups. I organize in our market here in Maui. I organize meetups for investors to get together. I do them on Zoom. I do them in person at Starbucks. Sometimes we do them at a brewery or a restaurant, and it's a fun time. It's a great learning experience. And overall, it's just a really great way to network with other investors and find those wholesalers, because there's no other way. It's pretty hard to know who's wholesaling in your market if you don't go to where the wholesalers are. So, and the wholesalers want to find you also, because the reason the wholesaler is at the meetup is because they want to find the cash buyer, as we call the flipper, is the cash buyer, right? They want to find the guys that are going to flip the house to buy their deals once they get the wholesale under contract. So don't be bashful about approaching them. They're just as anxious to meet you as you are to meet them, and go up and get on their buyers list. Next up, last main source I'm going to talk about is for finding deals to flip are auctions. This one I'm going to give a little bit of maybe a hesitance on, just for somebody starting off, because there's a lot that you need to understand before you go out and buy a property at an auction. A lot of the auctions are no contingencies, no outs, right? Like once you make a bid, you are buying that house, or you're at least losing a deposit. Again, in my market, at the live in-person auction at the courthouse, you need to have 10% of your max bid at risk in order to place the bid. So if anything changes, you find out, oh, it needs foundation work, or there's a bigger problem than anticipated, then you can lose that money. And on an $800,000 house, that's $80,000 you could be losing, just because if you're new and you don't know everything that you need to check, like your title report. Checking title is one of the most critical things you need to do when you're bidding on an auction property. Now, generally speaking, the online auctions are a little lower risk than the in-person courthouse sheriff sale type of auctions. The online auctions are almost always going to be properties that have gone through foreclosure and are now bank owned, or also referred to as REO, the initials or the letters REO, which stands for real estate owned. And essentially, REO just means that this home is owned by the bank. REO is the bank's term for their portfolio of real estate owned. And so it's that term, that phrase has just caught on as being the go-to phrase for a property that could be referred to as a foreclosure, because it did go through foreclosure. However, it is, and I don't know if it's right or wrong to call an REO property a foreclosure. Again, it did go through a foreclosure to become an REO, but really, I think the appropriate name of the property at that stage is an REO, a real estate owned or bank owned property. Once the bank goes through their process of doing the foreclosure, which at the courthouse, that's what is happening. The bank is foreclosing on the property. And part of the foreclosure process is to have a public auction where anybody can come and bid on the property. Typically, at least here in the Maui market, the bank will set their opening bid. So they are going to start and make the first bid. And it's typically going to be somewhere around their total payoff, their total debt owed on that mortgage. So if the borrower owes $500,000 on a mortgage and the bank is foreclosing, a lot of times the bank is going to go to the auction and enter an initial bid, a starting bid, somewhere around what their total amount owed is. Once they finish that process of the foreclosure, that property goes back to the bank. They take ownership if nobody else buys it. And then they have a couple different options of how they sell that property, but a really common and popular one is that they then auction the property on an online auction. These are a lot easier and more beginner friendly. They do tend to have a little bit more competition, I would say. So you need to watch a few more of them, I would say, in order to actually get one that's a good deal. But there's a lot lower barrier to entry, because you don't have to have hundreds of thousands of dollars in cash. You can just, most of the auction websites will require a couple $1,000 hold on your credit card in order to make a bid. However, I still recommend being very careful with the online auctions. Make sure that you have gone to, watched a lot of these auctions first off, and gone and when you can, when there's they allow you to see the property. Go and see them, inspect them, get a really good feel. Just, I don't recommend seeing your first online auction, thinking it's a pretty good price and just jumping on it and throwing all your money all in on it. That usually ends badly. I know a lot of guys that have done that before, and almost every time it ended badly. Um, there's been so many, I have a lot of friends where their very first time at the auction, some property came up and it was like this crazy low price, and they didn't understand why nobody was bidding on it. So they bid on it, they win it, they have to put their life savings into closing the property, and then they find out there's some major title problem, it's not worth anything, or there's some major problem that you never would have foreseen if you didn't have the experience of just watching these auctions happen. So again, not to discourage you, there's certainly potential there, and especially in the bigger markets, in the bigger your city is, the more volume you're going to have. So the more properties you're going to have going through online auctions every day. And there's a few of these different sites out there. They're very easy to find. So check them all out and watch a few of the auctions and kind of get a feel for how they work. And so those are the main ways that we use to find properties. Let's move on to the next topic.